Genesis holds the key to some of the most profound mysteries of existence. What if the Bible isn't presenting a single creation story, but rather two, each revealing a different side of who we are and why we exist? Could it be that the divine has woven a deeper mystery into the very fabric of our beginnings, a mystery that has been hiding in plain sight for millennia? In Genesis chapter 1, humanity is created in the image of God, majestic, divine, and shining with His glory. It's a creation that transcends space and time, where the light of Elohim fills the earth, and man and woman are made in His likeness. This is a picture of what we were meant to be: pure, reflecting God's brilliance, free from limitations. But in Genesis 2, a different picture emerges. Here, Yahweh Elohim forms man from the dust of the earth, breathing life into him, placing him in a garden with boundaries, a place of obedience, and a place where choices have consequences. This humanity is fragile, bound by the realities of the world, yet carrying within it the breath of divinity. These two accounts may seem similar, but they are, in fact, revelations of two distinct aspects of humanity. One speaks to our divine potential, while the other shows us the limits of our earthly existence. Together, they form a complete picture of who we are, beings made in God's image, yet facing the struggles of our human nature. The question is, why has this distinction been overlooked? Why do we often miss the powerful truth that is hiding right in front of us? Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 aren't just stories of creation, they are stories of our identity. They show us that we are not just made from dust, we are also made from light, reflecting the divine. And the tension between the two is where our true purpose lies. As we explore these accounts, ask yourself, how often do you feel the pull between something greater, a divine calling, and the weight of the earthly world that binds you? What if the key to understanding our true nature lies in understanding both the divine and the earthly aspects of our being? Let's unlock this mystery together. In Genesis 1, humanity is created with a divine command. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. There is an immense majesty in this declaration. Humanity is made in the image of Elohim, the Creator who speaks the universe into existence. The imagery here is vast, transcendent, pure. No names are given. There is no mention of a garden or boundaries. This creation is cosmic in scale, a human race born of divine light, eternal and free, destined to reflect the glory of God throughout the universe. The man and woman are created together, without hierarchy, sharing the same divine calling to steward the earth. In this first creation, the focus is on humanity's spiritual potential and the ability to mirror the Creator's radiance. But then, the narrative shifts. Genesis 2 begins with a more personal touch. Here, Yahweh Elohim enters the scene, and the tone changes drastically. The first human is not spoken into existence. He is carefully formed from the dust of the earth, a process that involves physical interaction. Yahweh Elohim breathes life into him, and from this, a living being is born. This creation is not cosmic, but intimate, bound by the earth. The divine breath makes man a living soul, yet he remains grounded in the physical world, placed into the Garden of Eden, a paradise where boundaries exist and choices carry weight. Why this shift? The creation story in Genesis 2 brings something new into focus: limits, relationships, and free will. The first creation reflects humanity's divine origin, its boundless potential to reflect the glory of Elohim. But in Genesis 2, the emphasis is on a covenantal relationship with God. It is here that humanity's ability to choose becomes central, as the first man is given a command. "Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." This story adds the possibility of failure, and with it, the possibility of redemption. Humanity is not just a divine reflection in this account. Humanity is also placed in a situation where their choices will shape their journey. This distinction between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is not a contradiction, but a revelation. Each story highlights a different aspect of the human experience. The first account speaks to humanity's spiritual potential, a creation full of divine light, existing in perfect harmony with God. The second account speaks to humanity's earthly reality, a being formed from dust, bound to the earth, given the freedom to choose. Both accounts reflect the fullness of who we are, creatures made in God's image, yet shaped by the world around us. We are both divine reflections and fragile beings, capable of great love and great failure. Consider this. How often do you find yourself torn between the pull of something higher, a sense of divine calling and purpose, and the harsh realities of life that pull you in the opposite direction? You may feel the tension between your spiritual aspirations and your earthly limitations, and this is not new. It's the story of humanity itself, captured in these two accounts. The tension is there because Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are telling us that we are not simply spiritual beings confined to a fallen world, nor are we merely earthly creatures separated from the divine. We are both. We are beings with heavenly potential, but we are also deeply rooted in the realities of our human condition. This tension becomes clearer when we look at the creation of woman in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 1, man and woman are created together, equal, side by side. Their purpose is shared, to reflect the image of God and to steward the earth together. But in Genesis 2, the woman is created after the man, formed from his side, not as a separate creation, but as his companion. The woman is not merely an equal partner in the creation story. She is the response to the man's solitude. She completes him, and together they form the unity that God intended. This subtle shift in the creation of the woman is a key point of reflection. In Genesis 1, we see equality, man and woman created together, side by side, in the image of God. In Genesis 2, we see a complementary relationship, a partnership that is not just about equality, but about a deeper connection, a response to a need. The woman is created from the man's side, showing that she is not just his counterpart, but his partner in the journey of life, equal yet distinct, with a unique role to play in God's grand design. This difference is not simply about creation chronology, but it reflects the nature of relationships in God's eyes. The man and woman are equal in worth, yet their roles complement each other in the most profound way. This speaks to the deep interdependence that should exist in all relationships, not one over the other, but together, with balance and mutual support. The divine image is reflected in their unity, not in their separation. Now, let's look at the broader implications. In Genesis 2, the Garden of Eden is introduced. This is more than a physical place. It is a representation of our relationship with God. It is here that humanity lives in harmony with the Creator, but it is also here that free will enters the picture. The command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil sets humanity on a path where their choices matter. The Garden of Eden represents a place of freedom, a place where humanity is invited to choose. However, it is also a place where the consequences of choices are real. Humanity's first choice, obedience or disobedience, will determine the trajectory of their relationship with God and the future of mankind. This is where Genesis 2 begins to unfold the truth of who we are. We are created for freedom, but with the responsibility that freedom entails. We are not just spiritual beings, but moral beings, capable of making choices that affect not only ourselves but the world around us. This moral aspect of humanity is what sets us apart from the rest of creation. We have the ability to choose right from wrong, to live in harmony with God, or to choose rebellion. The story of humanity from the beginning has always been about this choice, the choice to live according to God's will or to reject it. As we look deeper into these two stories, we see that Genesis 1 reflects our divine origins, but Genesis 2 shows us the realities of our earthly existence. The first creation story speaks to the light we were made to reflect, while the second speaks to the dust we were formed from. Both are true. We are both divine and earthly, reflecting the glory of God while struggling with our human condition. This duality within us is where our true journey begins. We are not just made from dust, nor are we simply reflections of light. We are both. And it is in this tension between the divine and the earthly that we find the meaning of our lives. We are called to live as image-bearers of God, but we are also called to live in the world, to face its challenges, and to choose the path that leads us back to Him. Think about this for a moment. What does it mean to live in the tension between your spiritual aspirations and your earthly struggles? How does this shape your everyday choices, your relationships, and your sense of purpose? The story of Genesis offers us a glimpse into the deep mystery of who we are. We are both divine and human, and it is in embracing both sides of our nature that we find our true calling. The divine light of Genesis 1 and the earthly dust of Genesis 2 are not opposites, but partners in the story of humanity. Together, they reveal the fullness of what it means to be truly human. And so, we are left with a question. How will you live out the truth of Genesis in your own life? Will you embrace your divine potential, even as you face the struggles of your human condition? Will you live as an image-bearer of God, reflecting His light, even as you walk in the dust? This is the journey of humanity, a journey that began in Genesis and continues today. How will you walk it? The beauty of the Bible lies not only in the stories it tells, but also in the depth and layers those stories carry. When we look at Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, we're not just reading two versions of the same story. We're encountering two distinct revelations of humanity's divine and earthly nature. These stories are important because they reveal something profound about who we are and why we exist, something that speaks directly to the tension between our spiritual aspirations and our human limitations. In Genesis chapter 1, humanity is introduced as a magnificent reflection of the Creator. The first creation story speaks to our divine origins, where Elohim breathes life into all of creation, creating man and woman in His image. There is no sin, no struggle, just pure potential. Humanity is made to be a glorious reflection of the divine, born from light, to fill the earth with divine glory. The spiritual potential of humanity is paramount here. Everything is good, and everything is made to reflect the beauty and holiness of God. We are divinely created beings, capable of living in harmony with the Creator and with creation. However, Genesis 2 shifts this view, revealing the reality of our earthly existence. In this account, we are formed from the dust of the earth. Yahweh Elohim doesn't just speak. He bends down, takes the dust, and shapes it into a living being. Humanity is no longer simply a divine reflection. We are also fragile beings, bound to the earth and subject to its limitations. The creation of man from dust and the woman from his side introduces the concept of relationship and interdependence, showing us that we are not made to live in isolation, but to live in community with one another and with God. The Garden of Eden becomes the setting for humanity's testing and choice. Here, free will enters the story, and with it, the possibility of failure. The command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil introduces the reality that our choices matter. Genesis 2 reveals our earthly struggle, that while we are made in the image of God, we are also bound by the realities of sin, temptation, and consequence. It is in Genesis 2 that we are given the opportunity to experience grace and mercy through our relationship with God, as He walks with us, teaching us through both blessings and consequences. So, why are these two creation stories so important? Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not contradictory, but complementary. Together, they present the fullness of human existence. The first creation speaks to our spiritual potential, our divine calling to reflect God's glory. The second creation speaks to the earthly journey, the reality of our struggles, our choices, and our need for God's guidance and grace. These two accounts invite us to understand that we are both divine and earthly. We are created in God's image, yet we are bound to the earth. This tension is not a flaw. It is what makes us human. The spiritual and the physical, the heavenly and the earthly, the light and the dust, these two aspects are not separate, but interwoven into the very fabric of our being. It is in this tension that our true nature is revealed. When we reflect on these two creation stories, we must ask ourselves, how do we live out this tension in our own lives? How often do we feel the pull between our spiritual aspirations, our longing to reflect God's image, and our earthly struggles, our limitations, and our human failings? Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 show us that both parts of us are essential to understanding who we are. We are not just spiritual beings walking the earth, nor are we just earthly creatures searching for the divine. We are both, and it is this duality that gives our lives meaning and purpose. This realization is crucial because it shows us that the journey of life is not just about seeking spiritual enlightenment or earthly success. It is about learning to navigate the tension between these two worlds, about embracing our divine nature while acknowledging and living in the realities of our earthly existence. This is the essence of what it means to be human. As you reflect on the stories of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, think about how they apply to your own life. Are you more focused on the spiritual side, the divine potential within you? Or do you find yourself pulled by the earthly struggles that define your existence? What if the secret to living a fulfilling life is to embrace both, to honor your divine calling while accepting and learning from the struggles that come with being human? This is why Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are not just ancient texts. They are living truths that speak to us today. They remind us of the divine potential within us, but they also teach us that the earthly journey is just as important. Together, these two creation stories give us the roadmap for how to live fully, embracing both our divine origins and the reality of the world we live in. Now, as you move forward, remember this. The story of Genesis is not just about where we came from. It's about who we are and who we are becoming. We are both created in God's image and formed from the dust of the earth, and it is in this beautiful tension that our true story unfolds. After Cain's offering is rejected by God, he is overcome by jealousy and rage. This leads him to commit the first murder in human history, taking the life of his brother Abel. But something strange happens immediately after the murder. God confronts Cain, asking where his brother is, and Cain famously responds, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Yet God, in his mercy, does not simply condemn Cain. Instead, he warns Cain of the consequences of his actions, and then Cain is given a mark as a sign of protection. God declares that anyone who harms Cain will face sevenfold vengeance. In this moment, Cain expresses an unexpected fear. "Whoever finds me will kill me." At first glance, this might seem like a moment of remorse or guilt, but there is something deeper at play. The question arises, if the only people on earth at this point are Adam, Eve, and Cain, who exactly is Cain afraid of? His fear reveals an unsettling truth. There must be others on earth, people who were not part of the original creation in the Garden of Eden. This introduces a mysterious element that has puzzled theologians and scholars for centuries. Cain's fear suggests a population that existed outside Eden, outside the lineage of Adam and Eve. This raises profound questions about the timeline of creation and the nature of humanity. Were these other people perhaps descendants of another creation, or were they beings who had already been scattered across the earth, untouched by the consequences of the fall? It's a question that remains unanswered, but one that highlights a deeper mystery woven into the fabric of the Bible. As we reflect on this, consider how the story of Cain's fear mirrors the struggles we face today. How often do we, in the midst of our own mistakes or failures, fear the consequences, not just of what we've done, but of the unknown? Cain's story speaks to the human condition, the deep-rooted fear of retribution, isolation, and the uncertainty of what lies ahead when we make choices that separate us from God and others. Yet in the midst of his fear, Cain is protected by God, showing us that even in our darkest moments, God offers mercy and grace. What if Cain's fear isn't just a story about the past, but a reflection of the fear we carry within us today? It's the fear of being lost, the fear of separation, and the fear that our actions might have lasting, irreversible consequences. But Cain's story also invites us to remember that God, even in his justice, shows mercy. The mark on Cain was not a curse, but a sign of protection, a reminder that God's love and grace are extended even to those who have strayed far from his will. In Genesis 1, male and female are created simultaneously, side by side, with equal purpose. There is no hierarchy. Both are made in the image of God, called to reflect his glory together. But in Genesis 2, the creation of woman takes on a more intimate tone. She is not created at the same time as the man, but is formed from his side, taken from his rib. This act speaks to a deeper interdependence, a partnership that is not just about equality, but about a unique relationship between the two. In this second account, woman is not simply a companion for man, but a response to his need for relationship. God sees that it is not good for man to be alone, and so he creates the woman as his helper, his counterpart. But this word helper in the Bible does not carry a sense of subordination or lesser value. It is the same word used to describe God himself as a helper to his people. The woman is not created to serve the man, but to complete him, to be his partner in the divine mission to fill the earth and reflect God's glory. This creation of woman from man's side is not just a physical act. It symbolizes the deep connection and unity that should exist between man and woman. It's not about dominance or inequality, but about mutual support, where both come together to fulfill their God-given purpose. The woman is created from the side of the man, not from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be beneath him, but from his side to walk beside him, to be his equal and his partner. The creation of woman in Genesis 2 also speaks to the role of women in God's plan. While much of the focus in society today is on equality and power dynamics, the Bible's view of women is not about competition or comparison, but about complementarity. Men and women are called to reflect the image of God together, not in isolation, but in relationship. This divine partnership is the foundation of all relationships: love, respect, and unity. The moment of woman's creation reveals something deeper about the nature of humanity itself. From the very beginning, humanity was meant to be in relationship. The first human, formed from the dust of the earth, could not fulfill his purpose alone. He needed the woman. He needed community, connection, and partnership. This shows us that no one is meant to live in isolation. Our divine calling is lived out together, in relationship with others. Yet the story does not end with creation. The woman's role evolves when she encounters the serpent. The fall of man and woman is not simply about the breaking of a command, but about disobedience and the consequences of that disobedience. The woman, in her dialogue with the serpent, becomes the pivotal figure in the story of humanity's fall. But this is not a failure of the woman alone. It is the failure of both man and woman to heed God's voice and obey his commands. In the woman's fall, we also see the reality of human weakness and the need for redemption. The woman, like the man, is not perfect, but she too carries the image of God and is capable of great things. Even in her failure, she is offered grace. God does not abandon her but promises redemption through the seed of the woman, the first promise of salvation that would one day be fulfilled in Christ. The woman, who was created as the helper, will now be the one who brings forth life into a fallen world. The role of women in the Bible is not just to reflect beauty or to serve others. Women are co-laborers in the divine plan, just as men are. Their strength, their wisdom, and their compassion are vital in the unfolding of God's kingdom on earth. Just as the man was created for a purpose, so was the woman. And in the role of the woman in salvation history, we see the redemptive nature of God, that no matter how far humanity falls, God always provides a way back to him. This is the story of humanity. We are created to live in relationship with God and with one another. Both man and woman are made in God's image, equally reflecting his glory. Yet both are also deeply flawed, needing each other and needing God's grace. And in this, we see the heart of the gospel, that God in his mercy restores and redeems what has been broken. Through both the man and the woman, the divine plan unfolds, offering hope for all. The story of the Nephilim is one of the most mysterious and enigmatic parts of the Bible, tucked away in Genesis 6:1-4. It speaks of beings who are neither fully human nor fully divine, a strange hybrid born from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The text tells us, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. This brief mention leaves us with more questions than answers, questions that have echoed throughout history, sparking debates, speculation, and intrigue. The Nephilim are often described as giants, beings of immense stature and power. Some traditions see them as mighty warriors, others as fallen angels. In any case, their existence marks a significant break in the divine order. These beings were not created in the way humanity was, by the hands of God alone, but instead came into being through the crossing of the divine and human realms. This act, some argue, disrupted the balance between heaven and earth, leading to consequences that are still felt today. In understanding the Nephilim, we have to ask ourselves, what does their story reveal about the nature of humanity and the divine? Why would the sons of God choose to take human wives? And what does it mean that these unions resulted in such powerful offspring? These questions speak to deeper themes about the boundaries between the divine and the earthly, and the consequences of transgressing those boundaries. At the heart of this mystery lies a profound truth about humanity's struggle with the divine. We are constantly walking the fine line between heaven and earth. In many ways, the Nephilim represent this tension. They are both human and divine, yet neither fully one nor the other. Their existence is a reminder that when we blur the lines between the earthly and the heavenly, there are consequences, and sometimes those consequences can be more far-reaching than we ever imagined. The Nephilim story challenges us to reflect on the choices we make in our own lives. Are we living in harmony with God's will, or are we stepping outside the boundaries He has set for us? Just as the Nephilim emerged from the union of the divine and the earthly, our choices, our actions, can either align us with God's purposes or lead us down a dangerous path. God's warning against crossing these boundaries is not just about physical or spiritual realms, it's about living in the balance He has designed for us. We are called to live in harmony with the world around us, to reflect His image, and to honor the boundaries He has established. The Nephilim remind us that when we step outside of that divine order, we risk not only our own destruction, but the distortion of the very image of God within us. As we look at the two creation stories in Genesis, we begin to see something remarkable. Humanity is made of both light and dust. In Genesis 1, humanity is created in the image of God, a being of divine light, reflecting the Creator's majesty. This is the ideal, humanity at its purest, free from sin and full of potential. We are made to reflect God's glory and to live in perfect relationship with Him. The first creation story speaks to humanity's spiritual potential, showing us that we were created to live in perfect harmony with God, reflecting His light in all that we do. However, Genesis 2 introduces a different reality. Here, humanity is formed from the dust of the earth, a creation grounded in the physical world. The dust speaks to our earthly nature, our limitations, our vulnerability, and our connection to the world around us. While the first account speaks to our divine origins, this second account speaks to our human frailty. The man is placed in the Garden of Eden, a place of beauty and abundance, but he is also given the responsibility to tend and keep it, to live by God's commandments, and to face the challenges that come with being human. The contrast between light and dust is a powerful image of our dual nature. We are beings who were created for glory and to reflect the divine, yet we are also deeply rooted in the earth, subject to its limitations and its struggles. This tension between the spiritual and the earthly, between light and dust, is at the core of the human experience. It is the story of our identity and our journey. In our daily lives, we often feel this tension. There are moments when we are aware of our divine calling, our higher purpose, and our connection to something greater than ourselves. We feel the pull of God's light, a call to rise above the struggles of the world and to live in a way that reflects His glory. But there are also times when we feel the weight of our earthly nature. We feel tired, vulnerable, limited by our circumstances. We experience pain, loss, and failure, and we are reminded of the dust from which we were formed. This duality is not something to be ashamed of. It is part of who we are. We are both divine and earthly, created to reflect God's light while living in the reality of the world's struggles. And it is in this tension that we find our purpose. We are called to embrace both aspects of our being, to live with an awareness of our divine potential while also acknowledging our earthly limitations. It is through this balance that we learn to rely on God's grace and mercy, recognizing that without His help, we cannot fully reflect His image. The story of Genesis teaches us that being human means living in the tension between light and dust. It is a journey of discovery, of learning to reflect the divine while facing the realities of the world. The Nephilim are a reminder of what happens when humanity attempts to cross these boundaries and live outside of God's design. They remind us that when we try to blur the lines between the spiritual and the earthly, we risk losing sight of our true purpose. In this journey, we are not meant to walk alone. Just as the first man was given a partner, a companion to help him fulfill his purpose, we too are called to live in relationship with others. We are not just made to reflect God's light in isolation, we are made to reflect His light in community, in partnership, and in love. Genesis shows us that the story of humanity is a story of tension between the divine and the earthly, between the light and the dust. But it also shows us that God does not leave us in this tension alone. He is present, guiding us through the struggles and challenges, calling us to reflect His light even in the midst of our earthly journey. The Nephilim remind us of the consequences of stepping outside of His plan, but they also point us to the grace that God offers when we return to Him. And so the story continues. We are beings made of light and dust, created to reflect God's image in both our divine calling and our earthly existence. It is in embracing both that we find our true purpose. The question remains, how will you live in the tension between light and dust? Will you seek to reflect the divine, even in the midst of life's challenges? The choice is yours, and it is through this choice that you will become the person you were created to be. As we conclude this journey through the creation stories of Genesis, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of the divine and the earthly, the light and the dust. We've explored the profound depth of these ancient texts, uncovering the secrets they hold about who we are, where we come from, and where we're headed. It's not just a tale of the past, it's a story that mirrors our own struggles, our triumphs, and our longing to understand our place in this vast, mysterious world. The Bible is not simply a historical document, it's a living, breathing message that speaks to our very souls. In Genesis 1, we see humanity created in the image of God, reflecting His glory and divine potential. In Genesis chapter 2, we encounter the tension of our earthly existence, created from dust, yet carrying within us the breath of the Almighty. These two creation stories show us the duality of our nature, the divine potential that we carry, and the earthly struggles that shape us. Together they reveal that we are not merely creatures of dust, bound by the limitations of the world, nor are we just divine beings, untouched by the realities of life. We are both, and it is in this tension that our true purpose unfolds. As we reflect on the story of Cain and the Nephilim, we are reminded that our choices matter. Cain's fear of being killed after his sin reveals the consequences of stepping outside of God's plan, but also the grace He offers even in our darkest moments. The Nephilim, born from the union of the divine and the earthly, stand as a warning of what happens when we blur the lines between heaven and earth. But they also point to the redemption that is possible when we return to the divine order. These stories are not just ancient myths, they are warnings, lessons, and promises for us today. What do these lessons mean for us now? In our own lives, we are constantly faced with the choice between the divine and the earthly. We are called to live in the light of God's image, to reflect His glory, but we also struggle with the limitations and temptations of this world. Every day we navigate this tension between our divine calling and our human nature, and it's in this tension that we are called to live out our purpose. We are not meant to live in isolation, but in relationship, with God, with one another, and with the world around us. Just as the man and woman were created to reflect God's glory together, we are meant to live in community, supporting and encouraging each other in this journey. If you feel that this video has brought something meaningful to your soul, if it has helped you find light in the darkness, I invite you to support the continuation of this channel. Your support, no matter how small, is invaluable to me, and it enables me to keep sharing these truths and bringing light into the world. Every like, every subscription, and every comment helps to spread the message of hope, love, and redemption. If you find value in these teachings, if they have touched your heart, please consider sharing this journey with others. Together, we can build a community that reflects the light of the Creator. One video, one heart at a time. This isn't just about numbers or views. It's about creating a space where we can come together to explore the depths of the Bible, to ask questions, to seek understanding, and to find peace in the promises God has given us. Your engagement is what keeps this mission alive, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this journey. Let us continue to reflect God's light in our daily lives, remembering that though we are made of both light and dust, it is through His grace that we can shine. Keep seeking, keep growing, and keep living in the balance of the divine and the earthly. Together, we are creating a brighter, more compassionate world. Thank you for being part of this community and for supporting this channel as we explore the endless mysteries and truths that Genesis and the rest of the Bible have to offer. May you be blessed with the light of understanding, and may the grace of God guide you in every step you take.